Wow, we got a really cool update to the GX How to Write a Cool Duel. You guys smash the crap out of that subscribe button so you guys don't miss out on more content. So they do these little columns every month since GX has been running, and it gives you an opportunity to peek into the mind of the old writer for GX and actually see what was going through their mind. So we're going to be starting off down here with turn 37. Now, turn 37, I suddenly came up with the idea of finishing off the Wild Tanya with Wild Heart, and I decided to combine it with the charming and lovely Amazoness swordswoman. I recall it taking a lot of trial and error to make the necessary adjustments. However, this kind of development where 100 points is the difference between victory and defeat is exciting in rule duels, and it's fascinating to make these scenarios. So if you guys remember, Wild Heart was one of those really weird elemental hero cards that kind of felt a little bit off. But I mean, there's also Blade Edge. Honestly, when you look back at GX and you know that they just wrote these cards just for specific episodes, and then of course, you know, they got the chance to kind of come back a little bit later. Very early GX did feel a little bit flip-floppy in a lot of the manifestation and ideas that they kind of had going for it. So that's kind of interesting. Now, turn 38. This is, for many of you that might not remember, Neo Bubbleman was one of the oddballs. So there was a debut of Neo Bubbleman. I remember Takahashi Kazuki sensei designing a version of Bubbleman that he himself rejected, but he suggested, why don't we use this for Neo Bubbleman? That's really cool, actually. So the original design for Neo Bubbleman was actually drawn by Kazuki. Okay. I was thinking about how to expand ways to develop the elemental hero theme in the future, and metamorphosis was the option. Now, if you guys remember, there's also Clay Budmal Man as well, which is another one of those really weird cards that just really feels like it has no business being in the Yu-Gi-Oh theme itself. But Metamorphosis, we were coming off of GOAT format. We were coming off of all of those years. So coming off of traditional Yu-Gi-Oh into GX, it makes sense that they would want to look at something like Metamorphosis, because the card, it's a very interesting card in terms of its design. And Jaden would be a duelist from the era coming off of, you know, Yu-Gi-Oh! Still within that main timeline, where he would be seeing some of these cards and some of these interactions, and he would be wanting to adapt them to his own strategy. So that actually makes sense. Turn 39, the first Ojama King. So this is the first time Ojama King appeared in the anime, and at first we envisioned the duel we would resolve by deviating from the normal means of winning with sacrificing being made. But ultimately, the scenario and the duel felt like a little too much like horseplay. I forgot if we asked to do it or not, but in the final draft, we changed it so the duel resolved in a fairly simple manner, with Ojama King powering up with Oja Muscle. That's interesting. At least that was the intent, since it was an Ojama, and it looks like it was off the beaten path. Ojamas are interesting. Even in the time of GX, the fact that Ojamas are still feel like a little bit of an abnormality in terms of the design space is hilarious. But it's also interesting to note here that when they were designing this, I mean, if you could lock away all of your opponent's monster stones, I mean, that basically is a win condition in itself. But then at that point, you're basically relying on decking out your opponent, because that's all it is. Like, okay, if I can't do anything, maybe I'll find like a Raigeki or something. Though Jaden didn't necessarily have the means to fuse off the opponent's field if you have no monster zones to be able to summon it to. So, I don't know. That one's interesting. Turn 40, the first sarcophagus, the second sarcophagus, and the third sarcophagus are assembled and ultimately the spirit of the pharaoh appears. Since an ancient pharaoh was set up as one of the 7 stars, that strategy was planned from the beginning. So how can we counter that expected flow in a way that we can make the duel exciting for the pharaoh himself and, of course, the audience? The duel was created with the intention of answering that question, which is where we do get to see the Hero Flash come down. So I always wanted to do a card like Hero Flash, and the timing turned out to be perfect perfect. I always wanted to make sure the individual cards could be useful later on, but I also wanted to avoid that feeling that the cards were conveniently arranged. So I included a slight sense of misdirection, such as the A spell card that would generally be useful in Elemental Hero decks. However, the ending of the story was completely revealed in the title of the episode, Strained Bitter Laugh. Yeah, I mean, it's really cool to see that Hero was designed to entertain the pharaoh for the first, second, and third sarcophagus. It's also kind of crazy that even to this day, the first, second, and third sarcophagus are just kind of worthless cards. So this is actually, we got some interesting Q&A down here. So let's ask Hikubo-san. Question, I admire the cool and dramatic duels in the anime. Could you give us some advice and tips and methodology to creating these duels? First off, let's start with the most essential part of the duel. This could be the using or pulling off a favorite card, a highly practical combo, or an overall strategy or tactics. Think about centering the duel around that. It's fine as long as you like dueling, and think about it as it should be a self-indulgent. Okay, so that makes sense. Next thing would be what is so great about the card combo or strategy? Why is it that you want to show it, and how can you convey that? Dig that into the integration, and what is more important here than the center of the duel is making sure that the characters are telling a story. That's interesting. That's some interesting marketing takeaway for this. So if the gag of a protagonist insists this card is great, however, if a pro duelist simply says this card is good, the audience will believe it if it is a great card. In order for this to happen, however, the viewer needs to believe that the character is a duelist that can be described as skilled. You can sell this during the duel, and you should establish things about that character before the duel starts so the viewer can concentrate on the duel. Even more important is the presence of novice duelist. It's extremely important for there to be a character who's interested in the duel but has no knowledge or meaningful experience, but having them question things. That's kind of where we saw the little back and forth dialogue in some of the characters from back in the day. Also, since anime and manga are entertainment, first and foremost, you should make sure that they are exciting. So make sure that all the characters in the story, including the opponents, in order to create an exciting atmosphere. So in the end, rather than making sure the duel is cool, I think it's more important to have characters who can make the duel look cool. And so as someone who thought about duels in the anime, I was always making sure that it was a duel for the best for the characters, and perhaps the inevitable that those duels were cool. Sorry if that's for not giving any actual advice. I think it was actually pretty good advice, honestly. Oh, so how was Jaden chosen to be Judai's partner? I think it was Takahashi Kazuki sensei's idea that Yugi should give Judai a card. Perhaps it was a result of the anime side's request for a connection between Duel Monsters and GX, along with sensei's thoughtful considerations. I forget how that became Wing Kuriboh, but I think the idea that we decided on Wing Kuriboh was pretty easy, and it didn't leave much of an impression on me. Interesting. So it was actually Kazuki himself that gave us Wing Kuriboh from Yugi himself. Kind of, it was a passing on of the torch sort of thing. You know, we've already left the mainline Yu-Gi-Oh anime, so now we're starting into this new journey. So the whole big story here is you want to be able to bridge that connection, like they said with the duel up there. The most important part of this was, you know, telling a story, and, you know, you're making the central piece the card. So as we're starting the journey here, Wing Kuriboh ended up being the central player for bridging us into this story. That's actually really, really cool, and I actually kind of appreciate that little bit of lore. We will be seeing more of these columns. I think that the telling of the stories that we see here are all very, very good, and I think they are an important piece of the lore of the game, and they actually do show, you know, some of the behind the scenes. You know, Yu-Gi-Oh! GX was something that it's a grail of a story. There is just so much that we can look at and analyze from within this story that it is a very beautiful time, and I actually very much appreciate that we have had all of these interactions and things to see kind of going forward. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Please leave a comment down below. Tell me what you guys think, and I look forward to seeing what more that we are going to see in the future. Patrons, thank you. Duel!
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.